good afternoon. On behalf of the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research at Georgia State University, I welcome you to the 7th Annual World Languages Week. CULTR, as the center is known, is one of 16 federally funded Title VI language resource centers in the United States. CULTR has created a unique identity around serving the needs of all students in the communities they represent by helping to promote language learning opportunities as part of a 21st century global education. Guided by its core values of access, advocacy, outreach, and research, CULTR has gained a national reputation for innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, regardless of socioeconomic or ethnic background. My name is Bill Nichols. I am the Director of CULTR here at Georgia State, and I'd like to thank you all for being here with us today for the keynote speaker session, which I'll be moderating. Before introducing this year's keynote speaker, I'd like to address a couple of housekeeping issues and technical questions. First, I would like to remind everybody that all panels this week are being recorded and will be available for you after the event. If for some reason your connection is interrupted during the panel discussion, simply rejoin using the same link that you had used previously. Our speaker will present for approximately 30 minutes, and will be followed by a Q&A session with you, the attendees. All attendees will remain muted throughout the entire session. Participants may submit questions through the course of the discussion in the Q&A box by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. I will remind you to submit your questions again after the keynote presentation as well. If you like the questions you see in the Q&A box, click the thumbs up icon to promote this question to the top of the list. This panel session will conclude at 1 p.m. At this point, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce this year's keynote speaker. Nive Ganeshan is a Senior Project Management Office Analyst for the Supply Chain Solutions Division of UPS. Nive is from Hyderabad, India, and moved to the US as a teenager. Coming from a family of linguists, she studied French and history at GSU. After graduation, she worked in logistics with a focus on HR and learning and development. Now at UPS, she leads training initiatives for global logistics and distribution. She explores best training practices and better ways to engage customers and employers. With her multicultural, multilingual upbringing, she brings a global approach with the enthusiasm of a startup culture to a company that is built on a solid tradition to bridge the gap between new and the old. The title of her keynote presentation is From Hyderabad to Atlanta: How Languages Shaped My Life and Career. Please join me in welcoming Nive Ganeshan.
Thanks, Dr. Nichols. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Nive Ganeshan, a former Georgia State University student. And as Dr. Nichols mentioned, I work for UPS Supply Chain Solutions as a senior PMO analyst. I am so happy to be here at an event for Georgia State. I grew up in Hyderabad and spent most of my childhood there. And like most Indians, I grew up in an environment where more than one language was spoken. In my case, I was born into a Tamil family, so we spoke it at home and continue to do so. If you know the history of Hyderabad, it is a classic example of being a city of true confluence of multiple cultures, religions, and languages. So as kids, we also learned Hindi, Telugu, and of course, thanks to colonialism, English in school. We also use these different languages outside of school in our daily lives. Now, what made my childhood unique is I also grew up on a university campus that specialized in teaching world languages, mainly Spanish, French, German, Russian, and Arabic, as both my parents were language educators. So at a very young age, I was used to hearing different languages, accents, and ways of thinking around me. India, being the world's biggest secular democracy, is built on rich history and cultural influences. Sometimes traveling from state to state in India can almost seem like you are stepping into a different country. In today's India, this harmony between religions that used to exist before is sadly not the case anymore. People have become more and more close-minded, but the architecture in India today still shows something different. So I'm going to show you that through these pictures on the screen. So this first picture is of the Charminar, which is an Islamic monument and mosque built in 1591 in my hometown of Hyderabad. And then the second one is a picture of the Meenakshi temple in Madurai, which shows a lot of the Hindu architecture. And this temple is about 800 years old. And then this third picture just shows some remnants of the British's impact on the country. So you can see that the detail in the clock tower is more Western. Both my parents taught German, and at the age of 5, my family lived in Munich, Germany for a year. My parents put me in a German kindergarten, and I was truly immersed in the language and culture. I was lucky to travel around Germany and Europe and interacted with friends my dad had made there while living there in the 60s when he was studying. My parents also made sure to keep up with my sister and me practicing our German when we returned to India, as we had several visitors from there who often stayed with us. Over the years, I've had many opportunities to visit Germany again, and the language always seems to flow back to me quite naturally. I took a year of German in the 8th grade and quickly realized that learning to speak a language is quite different from, learning to read and write it. Much to my dad's disappointment, I very quickly realized German was not for me. So these are some pictures from Germany. The first two are from Munich, where I lived. The first one is a picture of my kindergarten. I got to visit again in 2013. I just wanted to see where I went to school. And then the second one is of the Frauenkirche in Munich. And then the third picture is just a picture of a small little town called Paderborn. My sister studied Spanish linguistics and was a professor for some years before joining the corporate world and now works for Amazon. So my natural inclination was to pursue languages, just like my family. We like to joke that it may run in our genetics. The only difference is that I decided to focus on French in high school and then college. At Georgia State, I was a history and French major with a concentration on literature. There were plenty of parallels between both areas of study, and I was able to make a lot of connections between my literature courses and my European history courses. This is where I truly honed in on my writing, speaking, and analytical skills. I was also an avid participant on campus with French and Spanish club, as I had also taken 2 years of Spanish, and the different film festivals and cultural activities that the Department of Modern Languages conducted for students. The LARC, which was Georgia State's language lab, was the place to be for world language majors. And through that collaborative space, I made some of my very best friends. The really cool aspect of Georgia State, compared to your traditional red brick building in college towns, is that its campus, being downtown, exposed us to a lot of different kinds of people. Walking from class to class, you ran into people working downtown or people engaged in intense chess games at Woodruff Park. We often shared buildings with other businesses. This unique environment really refined my skills of being able to communicate with people from all walks of life, different ages and backgrounds. So this here is a picture of the city in Atlanta. That's my favorite building, the Bank of America Tower. And then here's a picture of me at the Georgia Dome in 2011 when I graduated with my family. And then this last picture I actually took a couple of weeks ago when I met with Dr. Nichols for lunch on campus. And what I noticed is that the campus has just changed tremendously in the last 10 years. I used to have, there in this little green space, there used to be a building, Cal Hall, and I had many, many classes, and now it just doesn't exist. As most of my classmates at the time, we were encouraged to pursue traditional careers for world language majors in teaching or translation or interpretation. So shortly after graduating, with great optimism, I took the GACE and got certified to teach French at the high school level here in Georgia. As enthusiastic as I was about landing a teaching job, it was the Great Recession, and the state of Georgia was cutting language programs across schools, and work was hard to find. To my luck, a friend that I had met at Georgia State referred me to an entry-level position at Coyote Logistics, a freight broker. A freight broker manages the transportation of goods from essentials like toilet paper to food products to even bigger commodities like construction material. At that point, I needed work and a way to pay my bills and told myself I'd give it 6 months. Soon after I started, my goal still ultimately being teaching, I then heard about the TAPIF program in France, which was a teaching assistant program offered through the government to teach on a contract basis. So I decided to leave logistics when I landed a contract at the Lycée Amiral de Grasse in the beautiful south of France. I lived in Cannes with the Mediterranean Sea literally a 5-minute walk from my apartment, and it was a dream. I spent 7 months teaching English at a high school in Grasse, which was a 25-minute bus ride away in the hills. The students in Grasse were very different from how I remember high school here in the US. They often spoke more than one language, which is also common in Europe. They seemed very knowledgeable and interested in the bigger world and its connectivity. And I had a great time there. Living in France did involve me living paycheck to paycheck, but I spent that money on travel. I was able to travel around Europe by myself, which was both empowering, eye-opening, and also it was brave. I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. So this first picture you can see is the view from my apartment in Cannes. It opened out into a little market square. The second picture is of the view of all of Monaco. And then the last one was a picture taken near Marseille. It's these beautiful cliffs called Les Calanques. I've also been lucky enough to travel to other places in Europe like Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Austria, Portugal, and Switzerland. So this first picture is from Lisbon, the second one from Paris with the Eiffel Tower, and then the third one's from Utrecht when I got to go to the Netherlands. While I loved my time in France, the people I met, my students I taught, some of whom I still keep in touch with, thanks to Facebook, I realized I did not want to be working in an academic setting. Something felt incomplete. I missed the hustle of logistics and supply chain, an office to go into, and honestly, not having to work outside of school hours to work on class planning and preparation. I also missed Atlanta a lot. So after the 7 months, I made my return to Atlanta with a lot of memories and life lessons. The company I had worked for previously was gracious enough to welcome me back. I attribute where I am in my career now to that first job after college and the people I met there. I didn't think I was going to return. I had honestly thought I would spend 6 months there and move on to teaching. At the time, it was a fast-paced startup with a lot of growth opportunity. They also like to promote from within the company, and I made my way into human resources and learning and development. That area was perfect for me because I did miss teaching a little bit, and this role gave me the best of both worlds. My time at Coyote gave me the opportunity to onboard new employees, introduce them to the industry of logistics, train them in operations, and help guide them in their own respective careers. I implemented the teaching skills and practices I picked up in France during my teaching stint. While teaching adults is different from teaching teenagers, it can also be quite similar. Every individual in my training classroom had unique learning needs. Coyote was big on hiring a range of candidates, folks looking for part-time work, recent graduates, people in between careers, and experienced and seasoned veterans from the trucking industry as well. As my professors in college had catered to our different needs as students, I employed some of their tactics and a lot of patience while ensuring they were enjoying their transition into our company and starting their new careers. I was able to engage with my trainees and build strong relationships with them because I had that empathy needed to connect with different kinds of people. I spent 7 years at Coyote and was also a core part of the human resources or people operations, as it's now known. I also had some personal accomplishments at this job. Not only was I the first woman of color to join the HR team here in the Atlanta office, but also the first person of color. The problem-solving skills I learned as a French major helped me come up with solutions for difficulties our employees faced at work. While being in people operations, I was considered a neutral party. I was able to mediate conflict well, as I possessed the capacity to see a problem from different perspectives. I was a champion for the employees in the office in the best way possible I could be, because I had a knack for knowing how to empathize and connect with people. Now, an important aspect of language learning is that you are not just learning to communicate in that language, but also how to communicate across barriers. I'm naturally outgoing and find it hard not to start up conversations with strangers. So after 7 incredible years at Coyote, I had the opportunity to work on a special project for 6 weeks at UPS. And to be quite honest, it was not the project or the work involved that I really enjoyed, but the relationships I made in those 6 weeks. And this propelled my career unexpectedly. There were some other people from my old company that had transitioned into UPS. And talking with them, I learned that tech was an area I could pursue because I had many transferable skills from my time studying French, as well as my work experience. I was lucky enough to be offered a role to do training in their IT department in their project management office. The PMO, as it's known, is a group at enterprises and companies that improves efficiency in project management and helps standardize processes for the organization. A lot of people on PMOs aren't necessarily traditional techies that have a computer science or information systems background. In fact, now UPS is actively trying to hire people from different backgrounds of study, as long as they have transferable skills and a willingness to learn the business. I have now switched over to the business side, but I'm still part of a PMO group with a focus on training solutions and communications. My current role requires me to employ my efficient and clear communication skills in the area of global logistics and distribution. We work across geos with UPSers and clients, not just in North America, but Europe, Latin America, and Asia. I create and execute learning strategies and must ensure that people who are not experts are well equipped to operate and use our products. I educate them in a manner and language that is accessible to them to better understand the products and services that UPS is offering them. Whenever there's a new feature or enhancement, I write what we call release notes to inform our stakeholders of the changes and the value it adds, employing my writing skills. I essentially translate technical language to more user-friendly language. I also must analyze and come up with creative solutions for different training needs across the company, as well as externally with our customers. I get to collaborate with people in different areas like IT, the business side, operations, and marketing. It is also common to give presentations and engage in public speaking on the business setting. So doing presentations in college, not being afraid to make mistakes when it came to pronunciation when I was first learning French, all geared me up to be a confident public speaker. So every day in my role, I am utilizing the skills I learned from language learning in some form or another. So the pictures you see here are from my time at UPS. The first one is when I got to test out one of our drone prototypes. It was super cool and super awesome to see it in movement. The next one is of our supply chain solutions office. It's located in Alpharetta, Georgia, so just north of the city. And then the last one is at our corporate campus in Sandy Springs, and that's one of the original package cars that UPS used to use to deliver things. So my message to you today is to keep an open mind. You don't have to have a business degree to start a career in the corporate world or a logistics degree to work in supply chain. If teaching and education is your passion, then yes, certainly go for it. We do need good educators. I know some of my teachers and professors have helped me to get to where I am today. There are many other career paths for you to explore with your world language and cultural studies majors. Always say yes to new opportunities, even if you think it may bore you or is of no interest to you at that time. You may discover something new or meet people that can impact you and help you find your passion or calling. And of course, there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with pursuing your passion as a career. I am very fortunate and grateful that I enjoy what I do for work, where I spend more than half my day sometimes. Being a member of the supply chain community, I feel like I am making an impact and feel fulfilled, as it is evident how crucial supply chain is today. A fun fact is that UPS played a major role in transporting COVID vaccinations and making them accessible to people across the globe. This past year has been a challenge to everyone, no matter where they live, and it has changed the way we look at work. We are more connected than ever before. Organizations are realizing that employees are performing well, if not even better, in a remote setting, and good communication is key. I mean, even this event is being run through Zoom. Language learning has countless benefits and will only impact you and your future positively. Studying a world language and its culture will make you stand out and be an asset to any line of work you choose to pursue. Not only does it connect you to more people in the world and make travel easier because you may speak their language and understand their culture, but it also cultivates an open mind, which inevitably will make the world a better place, a growth mindset, which is crucial to any work you do today. And it builds empathy to help you make stronger relationships and essentially makes you a valuable global citizen. So I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for letting me be a part of this year's World Languages Week. And I know we're going to open it up for questions in a second, but if anyone wants to connect or collaborate with me, if you have any ideas you want to discuss or you need help navigating your potential major, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email address. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I really do love just talking to people and connecting with them. So I definitely welcome it. So thank you, and go Panthers.
All right, thank you so much, Nive. That was an awesome presentation, and I think you've given us a lot to think about, and even some kind of avenues to pursue that you've inspired us. So let's take a look. I can check Q&A and see if there's any questions coming in. And I guess while we're waiting for questions from teachers or students or anybody in the audience, I can start us off with a couple of questions. I was taking notes feverishly as you were talking. Because one of the misconceptions I think that students have, and even professors have, this idea that if you study a language, like you said, you studied French literature, that you can only teach or work in translation. But clearly, our alumni have proven to us that there are multiple pathways that are open. And this is, one of the major kind of objectives of this event is to communicate to high school students to really think about languages in their future as a key to opening more pathways. So how would you speak to that misconception of, well, there's only two options, so why should I study a language? Or maybe there's other misconceptions that you've run across that you think, well, that needs to be corrected.
Yeah, and I mean, I do come from a family of teachers, and honestly, I never felt the pressure from them to, say, Nive, you're studying a foreign language or world language, you need to go into teaching. But then you quickly realize sometimes you do have to choose a career path based on circumstances, right? I started Georgia State in 2008 and finished in 2011. And so the job market wasn't that great. While I did get certified to teach, there were no jobs for me to apply for. So I really had to pivot quickly. And I think a thing to remember is a lot of companies these days are offering on-the-job training. So my time at Coyote, it was a very intensive 3 weeks where I got paid full-time, but they provided me with everything I needed to succeed in that career path. And so sometimes it's just about looking for other opportunities. And it's okay if you don't know what you want to do right when you graduate. I mean, I started Georgia State being a French major, and then halfway through, I decided to add on a history major. So it's totally okay to not know what you want to do. And so I would suggest, talking to as many people as you can to see what else is out there. I didn't know that learning and development was such a huge area in the corporate world. And then it made sense, like someone is there teaching folks how to do certain things. So I would just say, keep an open mind, definitely network, use all the resources you have. Sometimes I wish I had used Georgia State's like Career Center better. And I didn't do that, but what I did do is I kept in touch with my classmates, with some of my professors to see what else is going on and to see what other avenues people are using.
That's great. So there are a few questions coming in now. The first is as what did you look for in your search that helped you find the correct path for you? How does one find their passion?
That's a great question. Sometimes I still wonder what my passion is. But I think what I like to do is I noticed because I am very talkative, I always was the kid in class getting in trouble for talking too much. But I realized like that's a skill I have. I can start a conversation up with anyone. I feel comfortable to do that. So I realized once I started my, entry-level job at Coyote Logistics, I truly just looked at it as I just need a 9 to 5. I need a paycheck. I need something to pay the bill. But when I got there, I realized that they appreciated my personality of being outgoing, of, being enthusiastic. I like to have fun. And so I think when you are searching for jobs, it's important to look at what a company's culture is like, right? Coyote was a startup, and me being young, fresh out of college, I was 22. It really appealed to me because the people that worked at Coyote seemed like they enjoyed going into work every day. And that's how my 7 years was. I was excited to go in every single morning. And if you ask me, do I think logistics or supply chain is my passion? No, not at all. But I do see how it affects our everyday lives. And it feels cool to be part of an industry that does matter every single day. But I think a lot of my passion just came from more of my personality and what's important to me outside of work. But I found that at when I was at Coyote and then even at UPS to a certain extent, just having the ability to express myself and talk about relevant issues. This past year with COVID, that's been such a hot topic in all of our meetings at UPS. And just to know that you are helping out, however little it may be, you are still making an impact on something that is very important in the world right now.
Yeah. Now I'll remind the audience that you can upvote the questions. If you see one you like, you can give it a thumbs up and move it to the top, or if you see something you like, just give it a thumbs up. So the next question is, do you still see yourself teaching in the future?
I don't think I see myself teaching in a traditional manner. I did start tutoring my neighbor in French. He's in high school. So I do like doing a little bit of that. I think I have this sense of coaching that's instilled in me. I like to mentor people. I like to coach. So I don't think I'd ever go back to traditional teaching. But any opportunity I get at work to do something like it, I'm the first one that signs up for it, especially when we have the internships at UPS, or I love going to job fairs to recruit people. So it's not traditional teaching, but I like to teach people about UPS or about supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned transferable skills before, and really this idea of teaching, teaching happens in a lot of different venues and in different modalities even. When any kind of public speaking is an opportunity for a kind of pedagogical encounter, if you will, where you're learning from each other and teaching each other something new, right? Yeah. Here's another question. With social awareness becoming increasingly important in the workplace, how have you seen your indulgence in various cultures and languages better equipping you to handle this compared to others with less exposure to other cultures?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the last 2 years, we've seen a lot go on with society. We've seen the increase in DE&I initiatives at a lot of companies. A lot of them, I think, have truly stepped up to the plate too late in the game. These are things they should have been doing. And also the logistics and supply chain industry is very male dominated. So just being a woman in that industry has played a role. And then the way, I think in most companies, if you're in the tech world, it is pretty diverse. But once you move to the business side, there's still a lot of change that needs to happen. Especially at UPS, you do see a lot of older white males in like positions of leadership. We do have our first woman CEO, and she's awesome. She has really great progressive ideas that she wants to bring to the table. She has a new style of management. And so sometimes, I'm coming from a place like Coyote where I think it was a little bit more diverse in terms of age, backgrounds in study. It's been a little harder to navigate UPS. But I also feel like I look at myself as a little bit of a rule breaker. I like to, see how far I can reach before I do get in trouble. But yeah, I do think I just also being from India, having lived in different places in the world, definitely gives you a more sense of empathy, and as well as like being sensitive to other people and their views and their experiences that they're going through.
Yeah, that's great. Until your talk, I'd never thought of talking too much and breaking rules as a part of a skill set that we need in the 21st century. But I think that's great. Okay, next question. What advice do you have to students and their parents for students who want to study abroad but fear being too far from home?
So I will say when I went to France for 7 months, that was my first time being away from friends and family. Yes, I did move from India when I was 13, but I moved with my mom. And it was a big culture shock. I also thought they were ruining my life because I was a teenager and I was leaving friends behind. But now when I look back on it, I am so happy with the life I live, with the people in my life, the opportunities I have gotten. So I would say just be willing to take that scary step. I mean, we also now are so connected. You can FaceTime, there's Instagram and Facebook to keep up with people's lives. It's a lot easier, I think, to be away from home. And again, I think you just have to really learn to step out of your little comfort zone, because it will just open so much up to you, whether it's with work, whether it's personal relationships, whether it's just self-improvement. I think, and then again, just, being open-minded, like talking to people, like ask people if a student is looking for a study abroad position, maybe ask the teachers if they have people they know so that they can connect you with someone there. So it's not like you are going into this place not knowing anyone, but maybe you have one person to connect with and kind of help you feel a little more safe.
Yeah, there's a really great book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But I also like what you said earlier about always say yes. Like, if you say no, you're closing the door to who knows what. You just don't know what's out there.
Right. And I mean, and guess what? Worst case scenario, if you end up not having a great time, you always have a home to come back to, but you won't, I guess, live your life wondering, well, what would have happened if I had decided to pursue it?
Yeah. Another question is, what is your advice for students who enjoy learning a foreign language but find it quite difficult?
That's a great question. So in my time when I've tutored, also when I taught some kids some English in France, I think there are certain people that may not be geared to fully learn a foreign language, but I would just say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to sound silly when you are, especially like a language like French, where pronunciation is very hard and sometimes there's no rhyme or rhythm to why you pronounce a word a certain way. I would just say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of sounding silly. That's a fear you definitely have to overcome. And maybe find something in that language that you enjoy, whether it's music or film or TV. I know Netflix has so many international shows that you can watch now. So even if maybe, you are just struggling with like verb conjugations or, any of that, just try your best, and just find other aspects of the language that maybe will make it easier for you to perform better. And practice, practice, practice. Find people you can talk to. Don't hesitate. I have a bad habit where if I hear someone talking something, like I try to do it politely, but I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, but I overheard, are you from France? And I will just start talking to them.
Yeah, I think, especially living in a city like Atlanta, there's all kinds of opportunities through the Alliance Française or the Goethe Center. But if you look locally, there's meetups for people who are wanting to practice their language skills. I think, in the digital age that we find ourselves, like you said, there's all kinds of cultural content that is accessible to us. So if somebody maybe doesn't have the strongest kind of listening or speaking, and they want to watch a film in the original language on Netflix, you can put the subtitles in English, or you can listen to it in English and have the subtitles in Spanish or French or whatever you want. So there's options that kind of can meet you at the level that you're at in terms of language ability. Okay, let's see, another question. You've been exposed to several cultures. Can you walk us through how you did to adjust to them? What language do you find the most interesting or the most difficult for you to learn?
So I think I'll have to give it to my parents, because they really did expose us to many different things when we were young. Any opportunity that they had for work where they could take us as a family, they definitely did. So I think that really, really helped. And of course, there were adjustments that I had to make. One, being a teenager, like moving countries was a big deal. And I did struggle a little bit, but then once you find your people, it becomes a lot easier. And then in terms of, I obviously had like a soft spot for French, because I did really well when I studied it and I loved living there. But the hardest one for me probably was Hindi, and we had to take it in school, and they had just a very traditional way of teaching it. And I did not enjoy it whatsoever. And I did not get good grades when I studied Hindi. And also the Hindi they taught us at school is very different from like the Hindi you spoke outside. So I did struggle with Hindi quite a bit.
So another question is, do you have advice for students who will do a study abroad on how to be a thoughtful foreigner and getting the most out of their experience of being in a different country?
Oh, that's a really great question. I didn't get to do a study abroad in college because I was on a visa. But then I kind of look at my like teaching stint there as a study abroad. But I would say, again, ask people, if you're in high school, ask your teachers if they know, if they still keep in touch with students that have done study abroads. Maybe they have friends or other teachers in other countries that are looking for, students to come there or do an exchange program. And then how to be a thoughtful visitor. I would say this is something I learned in the US. I think when you grow up here, you always look at the other and think it's strange or weird. And you may not mean it in a negative way, but I would say be watchful of when you go to a different country and you notice something that is not normal to you. Instead of saying, oh, that's weird, how about you say, oh, cool, that's a very interesting way to look at things. I recently watched that show, Emily in Paris. It's on Netflix. And a lot of what the main character does is in Paris, she's constantly saying, this is weird, this is different, this makes no sense. And it's almost having this very like negative attitude towards it. And my whole thing is when you go to a different country, whether it's to visit, to work, whatever the case might be, it's a different country and it's a different culture for a reason. Like, did you expect, to see everything you see here at a different country? No. So just really go with an open mind. It's okay to ask questions as long as it's coming from a good intentional place.
Right. I think approaching with a sense of curiosity, and you referred earlier to a growth mindset.
Yes.
And there's nothing that really promotes growth as much as getting outside of your comfort zone. Being uncomfortable is a really good thing. You know, in today's society, we're so used to being comfortable, and study abroad is a great way for you to kind of push those limits. It almost kind of takes you outside of yourself. So you begin to, you see the other culture, but then you start to reflect on your own culture. And that's where the empathy begins to develop, where you're much more aware of the other members of your team or people you see in your community or just walking around the streets. So, okay, another question. What is your advice for high school? What is your best advice for high school second language learners?
I would say, I think there is a tendency in high school to not give as much importance to foreign language, as much as you would to maybe math or science. So I would definitely say treat your French class or your Spanish class with the same care that you would with any of these other core subjects. I think we refer to a lot of like foreign language courses as electives that you just try to do for a requirement to graduate. So I would just say give it as much importance as you do these other areas of study and practice. I think with language, what you realize is that you have to be interacting or involved with it every single day for it to really set in. And also, there are going to be certain things you're going to have to memorize, whether you like it or not. But the earlier you say, okay, I'm just going to buckle up and do it, the easier it'll get for you as you progress.
Yeah, I 100% I agree with you. And I would add, it's all about incremental growth.
Yes.
Like N+1. So take what you know now and add a little bit to it. But like Nive says, you need daily contact. It's kind of like with math, you can't cram before a math test. And with languages, you need to be using it or practicing it every day. The other thing that I would add is, there's very few other subjects that I can think of where you really have your first full exposure to the subject as a 14-year-old, right? As a freshman in high school. So think of what if we started teaching kids math when they were 14, or writing, or any of the other kind of core basic skills that we think an education should provide. So my point with that is, for students to really kind of be kind to yourself. Don't set expectations that I'm going to become fluent after a year and then get frustrated if you're not. Just, again, that growth mindset, just keep working at it. Okay, another question. Do you ever miss living abroad? Is it something you want to revisit in the future?
I guess never say never, but I am quite happy here in Atlanta. I like that it's a big city. I like that we have a huge international population. It's not like we're living in a very small town where people don't have a lot of exposure to things. I wouldn't say never. I know UPS as a company, they do offer special assignments. So it could be like 3 months or 6 months at a completely different place. I am open to the idea. But personally, I have a house here and I have a dog here. So it would be hard to move. But just looking back at my life, like living in Germany and India and France, like I thoroughly enjoyed every experience I had. And then, I've been here in the US for more than half my life, but sometimes I still feel like I'm living the living abroad experience.
Mm-hmm. So another person asks, I would like to know how you can find a job teaching English in France. Did you get a certificate? I know you mentioned that the salary was just enough to live there. Can you also teach outside of the school and work as a tutor?
Okay, yeah, so the TAPIF program that I mentioned to you, I'm not sure what their requirements are currently, but at the time it was targeted towards people under the age of 25. It was very much like a college application. You filled out the application, you wrote an essay on why you were wanting to do the program. And in my time there, I actually did tutor. I tutored an older lady who just enjoyed travel and wanted to improve her English speaking skills. And then I also tutored a girl who was going to be an au pair in England. So I would just say, definitely look into the TAPIF. I'm a little bit out of touch with the other programs that are there, but maybe Georgia State has some resources. Oh, thanks, Christy. She just posted the link in the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, super. So this question says, some parents put too much pressure on their children to learn foreign languages to be competitive. What's your opinion on that? What advice would you give parents to help their children perform better, and to their children, the language learners, to get by?
So being from India, I don't have very conventional Indian parents, because that is a thing in the Indian community to, put a lot of pressure on your kids in school from a very young age. Everything is competitive. A lot of Indian kids do a lot of out of school tutoring and stuff. And I would say, as a parent, you should know your kids well. And sometimes languages, they're not for everyone, and that's okay. I would say if you see your child giving their best, and if their best is getting a C in French or Spanish, guess what? It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Doesn't mean they're not going to go to college or get a job. I would just say students should never approach anything with any sort of disdain. Like once they start, having these feelings of, I don't want to do it, I hate doing this, that it's not going to be useful for anyone. So I would say it's okay to acknowledge that maybe your child isn't geared for languages. Maybe there's something else they're going to excel in. So I would just say be supportive of them. Take that pressure off of them, because I think once you start putting too much pressure on your kids, that's when they want to act out, or they're disengaged, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's best to just be supportive and help them find their path, right?
Right.
Because, yeah, you're right. When you start putting pressure and they feel frustrated because maybe they feel like they're not living up to expectations, that it just creates a whole kind of vicious cycle.
Yeah, and I think it goes into also defining, like, what is everyone's personal best is different. Mm-hmm. So maybe just defining what success for your child is, or maybe, their sibling has a completely different definition of what success is for them. So maybe just sitting down with your child and just discussing it and saying, okay, well, let's just try and achieve this first.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So, okay, next question. What was your process after graduation for staying in the United States, for working in logistics, education, etc.? And what was your path for choosing your majors?
Okay. So I moved from India, and I was on a visa, and I think my senior year of college, we ended up getting our green card. So I was able to stay, and like I said, I had just met a friend that was working this entry-level call center job and just referred me to the company. So that was my foot in the door for logistics. I would say, if you are looking for job opportunities in that sense, like, just keep an eye on different spaces. LinkedIn, they're constantly advertising, or recruiters are on there posting. Have your LinkedIn profile updated so people can do searches and you might pop up on their search. And then again, like, I just look back at my work history, and it's always been because of connections or relationships I've built. So just talk to people, see what they're doing. Maybe they can help you, maybe they won't help you, but they know someone that can help you. So just always keep that dialogue very, very open.
Yeah. How do you maintain your language skills in the languages that you do not speak daily or have not spoken in a long time? Also, what are your suggestions for reviving those languages that you haven't used in a long time?
That's a really great personal question. So I will say my French is not as great as it was when I graduated or when I was living in France, because I don't use it every day. But I know I've realized that I think my speaking skills have come down a little bit because of not engaging with it every day. But when I'm looking at reading or writing, it comes a lot easier. Again, I think just practice, like Dr. Nichols mentioned, I think having groups of people you can use the language with, or, I know I've lost a little bit of touch with French, but every time I see that there's a good movie online, I'll definitely watch it. And just finding like other avenues. Some of my students in France, I like to message with them back and forth in French because it helps me. But yeah, just finding people. I think with like a lot of my Indian languages, with the Tamil, I speak it at home with my dad and my sister, so it keeps going. But like I said, any opportunity I find outside of work, like if I meet someone that's from France, or even at UPS, like when we're talking to people in Belgium or France, I will always say, oh, that's what I studied, and I'll just have a quick conversation with them in French.
Yeah. I mean, it's like riding a bike. Like you maybe get a little rusty, but once you get into the flow, it comes back.
Yes.
So it's in there. It hasn't gone away, but it may be a little rusty. You need to oil those
Yeah.
gears a little bit. So somebody asks, how many languages do you speak? And
Okay.
I'll add to that question, is there a language out there that you would love to learn that you don't know yet?
So I speak Tamil, which is my mother tongue, but I can only speak it. I read and write Telugu and Hindi, which are also Indian languages. And then I obviously know French, and then I speak a little German and Spanish. I think Spanish for me came very easily because of the French background. But if there's a language I'd like to learn, I think I'd like to learn some Arabic.
Excellent. How difficult is it to get into an internship in the UK Arcadia program?
So I'm not familiar with this. Are you, Dr. Nichols?
No. Okay, I think CULTR is answering the question, researching what that is about. So, I wanted to follow up on some of the skills that you had talked about, because a lot of it, when it comes down to you distill it down to its kind of bare essentials, it really comes to empathy. The growth mindset, kind of being open, problem solving, and how do you feel, you're kind of connected with this corporate world, like what is the feeling in terms of empathy, especially, after the events of 2020 and this heightened awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion? How is empathy discussed or talked about? Because I think you mentioned, a lot of the companies that came out with DEI statements, it was almost like it was something that they should have been doing from the beginning. And at times it seemed like, okay, well, they're checking a box to make this statement, but are there deeper discussions going on about the need for diversity, the need for empathy, to kind of improve the workplace culture, whatever the industry is? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think with a lot of companies, what you're noticing is one, they've been doing things a certain way because that's just how they've always done it. And so when you are a language learner or you have that background, your brain gets almost rewired to think of things from a different angle. So that, so when you're in the workplace, that kind of just forces you to look at things differently. And like we said, some of these companies almost did it to check a box, but I think that's where, if you come with that background of exposure to different languages or cultures, it almost becomes where you have to be that change agent to sometimes even initiate those discussions. And it's not fair that it falls on you. The company should be looking out. But there are going to be times where it is up to you to start those conversations, or, when you have a meeting and maybe something happened in the community in Atlanta, maybe it is on you. And I learned that from a friend where she told me, if your managers aren't bringing it up, maybe you should bring it up. Mm-hmm. Why not? It doesn't have to come from them. But yeah, I think empathy, just empathy anywhere, people do run businesses differently. Like the way businesses run here in the US, we have a very, work hard culture where it's like hustle, 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 no time for breaks. You almost take pride when you're like, I didn't even sleep last night. I was working on this. And then you go to other places like in France where they have a lot more time off. They really value that time outside of work because maybe work is not their everything. So you have to keep those things in mind, especially maybe if you're working with a client in France that, hey, they're looking at this very differently. They might not respond to an email at 11 p.m. at night.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really appreciated earlier you were talking about kind of thinking about the culture of the employer or the business or the company or the organization that a potential student could be looking to apply for, a position with them. And thinking about, okay, what is the culture of that workplace and how does my personality fit in with that? So, it's less about skill set, but more about how do your personal interests and your personal kind of way of being and way of seeing the world, how does that integrate with or not with the culture of the workplace that you're thinking about, right? So I think that's really important.
It's very important to consider. And again, you're not going to 100% love the first job you get, but you might be learning things of, okay, this is what I'm not going to look for in my next job. Or if I become a manager, these are the things I will not do as a manager. So again, I think you have to have those experiences, good and bad, to formulate what it is you want out of work. Are you in a position where you're just head down doing your work and none of it bothers you? Or are you the kind of person that, you sort of, everything around you affects you? So it is very important to consider.
Right. Excellent. Well, Nive, thank you so much for your comments. Your presentation was fantastic. Again, we'll provide a link to all of the attendees with the recording once we've kind of pulled it together and get it all ready for everybody. That will be posted on the CULTR website, and we'll send a link to everybody. And that concludes today's keynote speaker presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us. And again, a reminder that all the recordings will be provided later this week. And I invite you to attend the next session, which is today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And that is the Humanitarian and Global Health panel discussion. And I think there's some more information in the chat as well. Again, Nive, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure having you today. And I look forward to seeing you this Saturday.
Yes, thank you for inviting me back.